By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. For the wicked carried us away, captivity required from us a song. How can we sing the song of God in a strange land? For the wicked carry us away, captivity required from us a song. How can we sing the song of God in a strange land? So let the words of our mouth and the meditations of our heart be acceptable in thy sight, O God. By the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, and there we wept when we remembered Zion. For the wicked carry us away, captivity required from us a song. How can we sing the song of God in a strange land? So let the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God. So let the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O God.
So we come from this rich tradition, all the way from the Old Testament times to today, where our leaders who've been crying out for justice. Getting on one accord so that we could cry out to God and so that we could cry out to are not going to take this anymore. So if you are the kind of person who's going into a campus, going into a situation, going into a home or family life where you have to stand strong and be steadfast and unmovable in the Lord, I would invite you to sing this next song with us. Now, last night I saw a few choir members around, so I'm gonna need y'all help on this, all right? All right?
All right.
I'm a black preacher now, y'all. All right? All right. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on the freedom train. Okay, now hold on. That was just the audition. Okay, I see all the ones who popped up. I'm gonna need y'all this afternoon. But for right now, because I started the wrong time. So for right now, it's all right. Y'all are ready. I love it. So we're going to sing Glory, Glory. Hallelujah. Since what? I laid my burdens down. Glory, glory. Hallelujah. Since I laid my burdens down.
Is to turn around and do this in just a moment. You're going to say hello to your neighbor. If you if you turn around and you already know the person behind you, definitely say hello. If you don't, introduce yourself. But if you already know that person, then I want you to turn to the person in front. And so just get to know the people in your vicinity, because we are going to be inviting you into conversation. So your task, say hello on all sides of you. You can go now. Alrighty. Thank you so much, everybody. Hello, hello. Wonderful to see you all. I would like you to, hey Emily, I would like you to raise your hand if you just met somebody new, somebody you didn't know before. That's so many of us. This side really had it going on. Thank you all so much. So these are going to be your conversation partners later on in our time together. I have the honor and joy of joining our two speakers today as we think about reimagining. I'm just for a moment going to share some introductory remarks. I'm going to call both of our speakers forward and share a little bit about their work. The three of us will then come to this table so that we can be seen by all of you. We will be in conversation for 20 to 30 minutes. Then we really want to invite you into this conversation. And so first, you'll have some time to reflect in the pews with the people you just met. And then we will also have the microphone and you'll be able to ask questions in conversation with all of us. As we think today about reimagining, of course, we considered the ramifications, the stakes, the obligation to reckon, and the quest to heal. I just wanted to share a particular moment in the history of this space that might inform us. On March 13th, 1960, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preached from this pulpit to your left. This was 5 years after Dr. King had helped to lead the Montgomery bus boycott. This was 3 years before the March on Washington. 8 years before he would found the Poor People's Campaign, which I'm sure will come up in our conversation today, and also, of course, hearing from Reverend Dr. Barber this afternoon. Alumni from this school opposed Dr. King's speaking here and published in national newspapers denouncing his invitation. But he came nonetheless, and he spoke, and I wanted to share a short excerpt from the sermon he gave in this space 62 years ago, and I think it might guide us as we begin this conversation on reimagining. Dr. King began his sermon, once again, right here, recognizing the ways in which his work necessarily, the work to be done both with those who were oppressed and the oppressor. And what he said that the crisis we face, the current crisis, was caused by white America's desire to extend the length of its life. And what he said is that life, in fact, is not just about length, this temporal fixation with how long we are to live. He said that life entails 3 dimensions. Length is one of them. The other 2 are breadth and height. And what he said about breath is this. He said, breath of life is, quote, an outward concern for the welfare of others. And he conceived of height as our relation to the divine. So I invite us all to think about life in its multi-dimensionality as it was preached here as we begin this conversation. Now I have the honor and the joy of inviting both of our speakers to join me. So I'm going to read their names, read their bios. When I say your name, you're welcome to join me here. So I'll begin with Minister Savina Martin, who will join me right here. Thank you so much. We'll go up together in just a moment. Okay, Minister Savina Martin is an incredible leader of faith, a lifelong activist. She's from Roxbury, Massachusetts. She is lifelong vocal, a local, a national activist. She is a poverty scholar at the Cairo Center for Religious Rights and Social Justice. She is a veteran of the U.S. Army and an advocate to homeless veteran mothers and individuals impacted by health issues that arise from substance use and domestic violence. She is the former executive director of Wings Incorporated for unhoused women and mothers, and this was also known previously as the Women's Institute for New Growth and Support. She currently serves on the National Advisory and Clergy Council of the National Union of the Homeless, and that was in 2019. She's a tri-chair of the Massachusetts Poor People's Campaign and a cohort member of Reading the Bible with the Poor People's Campaign. Lastly, she is on the Standing Committee of the University of the Poor. She is a 1988 recipient of the Martin Luther King Jr. Drama Major for Justice Award, conferred in Boston, Massachusetts. Minister Martin writes spoken word poetry. She holds an honorary doctorate degree in humane letters, a Master of Science degree in human services, and is a current seminarian at Boston University. She serves as one of many revolving preachers at Freedom Church of the Poor. I want to recognize we've already heard Minister Savina Martin's name spoken into this space because she is a spiritual mentor and friend to Reverend Erica Williams. And so we are so delighted for all the ways your ministry and Reverend Erica's have touched us today. And the last thing I'll say about Minister Martin is if what you've heard isn't enough for a lifetime's work, she is currently working on her memoir. Thank you so much for being with us. And now I have the honor of inviting to join me here, Nordia Bennett. Thank you so much, Nordia. Nordia uses she, they pronouns and holds an MDiv. Nordia has been serving most recently as the Center for Anti-Violence Education's Senior Program Lead. And that's a role that Nordia took on in October of 2021. She was previously a college guidance officer for a New Jersey-based nonprofit which empowered Black adults and adults of color to navigate predominantly white institutions. They also served as program coordinator for a New York City-based nonprofit working with gender-expansive high schoolers, providing a feminist and social justice lens, informing their experiences in urban communities. Along with a Bachelor of Arts in Communication and Religion, Nordia has an MDiv from Union Theological Seminary. Nordia is a youth pastor, continuously decolonizing religious spaces that do not offer expansive and intersectional frameworks of identity and power. She is currently serving as a children's youth minister at Park Avenue Christian Church in the Upper East Side of New York City. They are passionate about building immersive, participatory experiences where individuals have the space to expand their knowledge and make informed, authentic decisions. Additionally, Nordia believes in the culmination of Black radical imagination as a revelatory process that happens continuously with so much effort to move forward, grounded in radical transformation and possibilities. Won't you join me in thanking both Nordia and Minister Martin for being with us today? And with that, we can take our seats. Right, the last task for me, and then we'll turn it over to them, I'm going to set a timer so that I hold ourselves to the schedule. And just one more note for all of you, we want this to be a conversation, again, that invites you and that welcomes all. If you hear us talking about concepts, some of our questions may touch on different types of theology. If you hear anything that you're curious to learn more about, maybe new terms, new ideas, we will welcome absolutely you to ask, especially when we do open the floor to questions, what that means, and to ask us to expand. And we're going to be really cognizant here about how we can share in a way that assumes no prior knowledge, that makes no assumptions about where you're coming from. We want this to be open. Okay, so with this timer set, I'm going to go ahead and ask a question to both of you. And that is to just think about the stakes of this conversation. What does it mean to reimagine, and what does reimagination require of us?
Okay, I'll go. Hi everyone, good morning. It's so great to be in community with y'all today, and I think today is really special as my colleague and friend Naya Toussaint shared yesterday in their introduction. I actually grew up 15 minutes from Princeton, actually in the urban community, Trenton, New Jersey, which actually is the capital of New Jersey, and actually is quite stark different. There's this quite difference between Princeton and Trenton if you have not been to that area. And I wanted to begin with that because my identity is deeply ingrained into how I even came into reimagination. When I was about 15 years old, I deeply recall I would go to sleep and I would pray to God. I would pray, one, it does not have to be like this. And I would pray, two, anything that is not of you in me, please remove it. I was really saying, take this queerness away. And I was praying, I do not want this. I did not ask for this. So why am I here? And I'm bringing that up simply because reimagination has a lot to do with this ongoing conversation with yourself. It does not have to be like this. And so when we are grappling with this understanding of it does not have to be like this, we're opening ourselves up to, frankly, abolition, right? For me at least, reimagination requires us to go somewhere that we have gone before because we've gone there in our spirit, right? Like we're calling on our future selves to pull us, and because our future selves knows that we're going to end up there, right? And I will, as I continue on my conversation, I will go deeply into pop culture and pop culture references, and I'm a deep lover of movies, and I'm a deep lover of lyrics, and being able to pull on those strings because that is what our human experience requires of us, is that our scripture is not solely our Bible, but our scripture is our conversations that we have in community. It is the lyrics that we jam to, like Aaliyah. It is the ways in which we turn to Tupac and Biggie, and that is our reimagination. It is taking ourselves outside of the span of this church and using our human experiences and saying that God has placed us here on this earth to have a particular way of being. And so when we say that we are the imago Dei, right, when we saying that we are the image of God, we are actually saying I'm Christian because I'm an imaginary person. Like, I'm Christian. Like, we have nothing to go on. Like, being Christian is all about seeing things that we don't really see. Being called, what? Like, did we actually hear the Spirit? Like, how many of those conversations I heard this last couple days, people were like, you were like, I don't know how I got to seminary. That is reimagination. We're living it, right? Like, you were living it, right? So to reimagine is also to disrupt. It's to disrupt all the ideas and notions and expectations and visions that we had for our lives. I spent the last week lamenting because I cried deeply from the depth of my belly that I'm not turning out into the person that I thought I would be, right? And that we have to dream, right? And we've spent decades and years formulating these visions that we've had for ourselves, that our parents had for us, and that we're trying to somehow go in that direction. But what happens when you start going into branches that you didn't even know existed, going into languages and feelings that you didn't even know was possible, right? So when we reimagining, we're disrupting our comfortability, right? Like, we're disrupting everything white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny has told us that we had to hold on to be in this world. But yet, from the God within us, we're moving towards a place where we're seeing a God that put us here to twist and to turn. And so with that, I'm gonna stop that and put that to the side and just end with reimagining is an action, right? There's so much of us that I could have said no, but I knew it would be a detriment to me and my life. So reimagining is also a communal task. Right? So when you are able to walk in your being, I am then asking my community to see me. And then the act of seeing, I am then loved into my authenticity. And so with that, I am just asking this question I'm asking this question to y'all to just think about is, where do you want to go? And where will you not allow yourself to go? So where do you want to go, and where are you not allowing yourself to go? And I'm going to end with that.
So much, Nordia. Cool. Beautiful. Well, we can breathe and pause. Where do we go from here? So first, I want to thank everyone for showing up and giving us permission to speak into your lives, and for you all also showing up in the world vulnerable. And as my sister Nordia said, uncomfortable. It's not comfortable work, but it must be done. So where do we go from here? I showed up in the world confused and angry, but ready. And ready for what I didn't know, what the journey was going to be like. I was raised in a Catholic family in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And the story is that my grandfather fled the Cape Verde Islands, and we know the west coast of Africa, right? And we know the work that it took Amelia Cabral to do what he did, right? We can all research the history. And I grew up in that community of African-American mothers. So I come here with a lot of people folks that I'm accountable to, folks that are in my circles, like my beloved Erica, and so many other leaders, teachers, scholars, activists, and community folks fighting in their fronts of struggle and demanding that everybody has a right to live, everybody's in and nobody is out. And we work across lines of division, faith, labor, right? We work across lines of division. But what started was how I showed up in a community that was being ravaged during the social upheavals. And the thread in my life has been Dr. King. Dr. King, during his assassination, right? So we're here to talk about reimagining. That's when it all began with me, reimagining a community that was not ravaged by drug addiction, a community that their blight would be replaced with beautiful homes that we could afford and not have to work 113 hours of median income to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. I would imagine the churches being responsible and accountable to those that they walk by on Monday laying on the ground while in church on Sunday. You pray on Sunday and walk over a homeless man on Monday. Or during the Advent and holiday seasons, that we're not just talking about the exploitation of capital and commercialism and charity, and then we've got a little bit closer to heaven. No, we want a new heaven and a new earth, where this type of violent expression of poverty, and we went over that this week, right? The reckoning, right? The complicitness of Christians within the matrix of Christianity in the matrix. We went over the violence. And now we're going to reimagine the most violent expressions of poverty in terms of how do we create and imagine a new heaven and a new earth where everybody is in and nobody is out. I can tell you, over 30 some odd years ago, so I'm a part of the National Union of the Homeless. I was a very young veteran running from the military into the movement. As time went on, right? And we could go over the military-industrial complex and the proliferation of gun violence and everything else that's inside of those interlocking injustices that continue to keep us oppressed, right? But the mothers, we were experiencing the blight. And we took the blight to a fight. And we took the fight to the insight to say that we're going to launch, along with our National Union of the Homeless, which I think during that time in the mid-'80s we had about 17 locals across the country. At our height, we had about 25,000 poor and dispossessed men, women, children, our LGBTQ community, and everybody in between as a part of that National Homeless Union, right? So we decided that we were going to reimagine homes. And we started taking over abandoned houses and turning them over to folks, to the least of these, to the lost, to the left out, to those that were in the streets and in the homeless encampments all across this country. We launched a national housing takeover. And nestled in Roxbury were 5 of us women, 5 black women. Most of our community was, again, like I said earlier, ravaged by drug addiction, children being taken from them, from the policies of the foster care system, right? Some of us thrown in jails and prisons, right? And just left there to kick habits and die from drug-induced psychosis, right? When you're sick, you go to the hospital, you're not sent to jail. And the 5 of us taking over those buildings and getting arrested and thrown out, getting arrested and going back in, being kicked and beaten by the police, but going back in, we eventually acquisitioned that house, raised the funding, taught ourselves how to write grant proposals, sometimes till 2 and 3 in the morning, sitting at my kitchen table, writing grant proposals, and we built that house. This is 30 some odd years later, and that house is still providing homes for women. One house, though, right? We are on the precipice of an eviction avalanche. Folks are being evicted in unsurmountable numbers in this period. So we need affordable, we need to reimagine what new housing would look like. We need to reimagine land, right? We need to reimagine a world, again, where everyone has a right to live. As this Constitution says, we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and for the good and welfare. We have a right to provide for our common defense. And what does that look like? Our common defense is our safety against the police. And even more, housing, healthcare, the struggle around ecological devastation and the denial of healthcare and alt-right Christian nationalism is a human right for us to live. But how do we begin to reimagine that? This is the task before us. To go into a deep dive of critical thinking, breaking through new information, looking at the amount of inequities and disproportionate communities that are out there. We know what's happening, and it's not pretty. And we are up against, as my mentor Willie Baptist says, we are up against a very sophisticated and smart system, an enemy. And out of the poor in this country, we know we ain't got nothing to lose but our chains as we fight for bread, peace, and land. Through the God of our understanding, through the God of your understanding, who loved the poor. The legitimacy of Jesus being born through water and birth and through a virgin mother, which we could talk about, debate about. But he was in a human flesh and also divine. And I know that our Lord and Savior wants us to have a good life on this earth as we advocate and as we change and transform this system. We have to go back. We must go back. You spoke about the abolitionists, and I'll end with this. When we look back in 3rd century, right? At the 3rd century, and I always get her name wrong, Petra, and Felicity. She fought, and they died and were martyred. Because as Christians, we were not, or we were still being watched, as we are now, if we gather, if we commune, and if we discuss to right the wrongs in this world. So, where do we go from here? Where do we go? And the questions, these questions are very valid. What am I doing here? One would ask. What is going on? Well, we're in these institutions. We are witnessing poverty on a daily basis. We are witnessing the shootings in the schools across the country. We are witnessing public executions, just as Mary did with her son Jesus. We witnessed George Floyd being publicly executed. So where do we go from here in a world in disarray? That's the task before us. And we don't have to run out. You don't have to show up in a world like I did. Right? We don't have to. But we can build and we can study together and break through new information. And what does that look like? So I'll leave that there. Is that okay?
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Minister Martin and Nordia, both, for those words you've shared. Minister Martin, for the crucible in which you began to organize, and for the ways that the efforts you began then continue today, not only through that housing, but the through line of commitment and that radical spirit of inclusion you shared. Before we open the floor, I have a question for each of you that I hope will allow you to continue to share upon who you are and the work that you're doing. Nordia, I'm so grateful in your response. You shared both that looking broadly into this tapestry of this wellspring, right, of spiritual guidance that might inform us, and Alia's lyrics, right, the ways that they are sanctified and in turn they sanctify, and looking to this broad sort of repertoire, and of course looking at reimagination as a communal process and as an abolitionist one. I'd like to ask you what role, and of course, in addition to everything you shared in your first response, what role queer theology plays in reimagining for you. Nordia joined a conversation about a year ago that the WSCF US hosted. This was on Zoom. You can actually find the recording online, and it's an amazing resource, not least because of what Nordia shared. If you don't mind, I'm going to read a few of the words you shared there, and I would love to just hear your response as it relates to reimagination. What Nordia told us last year is, quote, "At the center of queer theology for me is being a black woman. And what does that particularly look like with my lens as a cis black woman in America that believes in God, that is queer, that grew up with Caribbean parents from Jamaica? How does queer theology hold that?" And what you also shared with us then, Nordia, is that queer theology is speaking life to death, that we speak every single day, that queer theology holds the complexity of my identity and who I want to be in the future.
So if you told me like years ago that I would be saying this, I would be like, you're lying, but my queerness is the only way I'm able to see God.
Go ahead.
Death, I was told that my being was actually death itself. And if you told me a couple years ago, I actually probably would have chose death, right? But I'm able to experience God in so many different ways that I didn't even imagine that the four walls would even be able to provide. The four walls provided me prayer, fasting, and devotion. And I'm pretty sure I had all those on lock, but I still experienced depression. And I still experienced this unwavering belief that God would show up, but I still woke up unhappy. I still woke up imagining that God would release me of this turmoil, but imagine no one saving you. You know, I think the task at hand that I think my guest that's on this panel is also alluding to, right, our communal obligation, but then there's this understanding of our obligation to ourselves. Like, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you who you are, and then you will believe them, and then you will carry out the justice that white supremacy thinks that they believe is actually justice, but actually you're giving yourself more to death. So, I did this work, and this work started around my hair. And my hair became this monumental process that became so intimate between me and God that God had given me a theology of my theology. And I understood God from this framework of top down. That somehow prayer will provide this revelation of this intimate nature of God, but then somehow having this huge disconnection between this life that I have right now. I come from Caribbean parents that came from Jamaica 25 years ago in hopes and dreams that I will become this human that has her agency and that will have her duty and be in this world. And to their standard, I did all those things. But I did not connect to this life. I didn't care about this life. As my good sister Joanna Truthful said, when I get up yonder, I'm gonna get my rights, and I'm gonna have all my rights will be restored to me. But what about today? What about now? I'm gonna get mine now. Justice now. Community now. I shouldn't wait till I'm dead to experience the justice of God. In fact, the land, the birds, the trees, they're here. They were created for us to be in, right? And so I did this work of trying to reimagine the Eucharist, reimagine the communion. And I don't know, for all of y'all, I grew up Pentecostal, and the main thing they would say, your heart better be right. I mean, I thought if my heart wasn't right, I was gonna burn up right then in the church. I really did. I thought I was gonna burn up right then and there. I was queer in my heart. And God knew my heart, so why would I take communion? Why? If you told me my being didn't have any validity, so why would I take communion? But then my hair journey became a process in which God revealed to me that the more you step into who you are and how you want to show up in this world is the more that you become more with God. And so I reimagined the Eucharist in the barbershop. I reimagined the bread and the wine in the barbershop. Because guess what? That is where I was living. That is where I was working it out. We would come, like you said, you come to church for how long? Pentecostals, we'll go to church for like 2 to 3 hours sometimes. But and then I got 6 hours left in a day. But then I have the rest of the week to get through. So what was I gonna do with the rest of the week? I had to live. So my theology in the church was not adding up to what was happening in my life. Yes. I was walking around like a zombie at 20 years old. Ain't nobody supposed to be walking around like a zombie at 20 years old. Because you know what? I was worried about God. I was worried that God was going to torch me down. I was worried about God was unpleased with what I had to do in this world. And then I cut my hair off. And God met me in that barbershop chair. Go ahead. Because I actually have it right now. Right? So we have Luke 22:19. Right? So the person that cut my hair was actually, his name is William. Thank you, William. And I traveled an hour to William because I didn't trust anybody else, and I didn't tell anybody else, because guess what? Because community don't know you. You tell community who you are, and your community will reflect right back at you. And so the verse says, William said, "Are you ready for this?" And then you have Luke 22, and then we have, "And he took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it, and gave it to them, saying, 'This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And then I said, 'Yes.' And in the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, 'This is the cup, is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you.' And then William cut my hair." So when I'm talking about the Eucharist, right, that is a moment in time that can be stagnant if we wanted it to. But communion is not just about the act. Why are you doing communion? You're doing communion because you want to be transformed. You want God to meet you. You are telling God that I believe that you are going to do a new thing. Why are we asking God to do a new thing if we're not actually ready to do the action to it? Do not ask God for things, because God will actually give them to you, but not probably in the way you thought you wanted them. So true. Right? So the climax of the Eucharist, right? When we believe that when we are in the action, that the bread actually becomes the body, and the wine becomes the blood, we are talking about us. We're talking about God doing a new thing in this human experience through me, through us. So when we're talking about reimagining, we're actually saying that God trusts us more than we trust ourselves. So when I'm talking about the new thing, I'm also talking about Octavia Butler. Because Octavia Butler says that all that you touch, you change. And all that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. Because God is change. So, what do you mean about my queerness and who I am? Well, queerness was a gift. And I'm going to accept that because in the movements in which we see Black trans bodies on the line doing the work. We see them taking care of our communities. We see Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera creating homes in which parents are more than likely are understanding, like, how did I get this child? But then someone says, this child was actually here to liberate you. If my parents actually listened to me, I was actually here to liberate you. We're here to liberate each other from the homophobia and transphobia and racism that we experience. God is here, crying out. So when we are saying that we're queer and we're saying we're Black, and then we're saying that we are saying F the empire, we're actually saying the empire is making it so hard for us to see God that we are so hard for us to see ourselves. And so what I'm really saying is, a lot of what reimagining is for us to take the mask off. And sometimes the mask we won't like it. We won't like it. And for us to do this work, I imagine when you did this work, you had to take the mask off.
Many times.
Right? Because we have to understand what we're loving into. We need to understand what we're trying to love into. I work at the Center for Anti-Violence Education, and majority of my work is providing active bystander intervention for public harassment and hate violence. And you would think a lot of the work is actually saying is about intervention, which it is. But a lot of it is transforming our ideologies and how we see people we don't know. I live in New York City. A lot be happening in New York City. But it's so easy for us to walk past each other and not even care what happens to this person. That is what we're talking about up here when we're talking about reimagining. We're not talking about some pie in the sky that can't actually happen. We're simply saying, do you care about the person that you don't even know? Do you care about these people? And we create communities, and we create our people, and I think that's a beautiful thing. And our community is the people that we don't even know yet. And so when I'm telling people that you can actually intervene for someone you don't know, the hardest thing for people in my workshops isn't that they don't want to do it. It's that they don't care. They don't think someone else matters. But we matter, right? And so reimagination, and I think a part of prepping for this was really, really hard. Because I thought reimagining had to be something that has to be so, so grand and spectacular, and it had to be theologized, and somehow the ivory tower understood reimagining. No, they don't.
That's right.
They don't understand anything about reimagining.
That's right.
But reimagining, what it requires us is to show up. And it requires us to put it into action.
Yes.
Right? I can have all these ideas about how I want to be in community, but they just in my head. But we gotta do it, right? We gotta do it. So, a lot of what I'm just trying to allude to is that I think the people that we claim that we hate, or the people that we don't understand, are the very people here to help liberate us. So when we want to reimagine, we're actually saying, God, I see that this is a whole other way that I'm trying to understand you, or another way you want me to understand you.
That's right.
And the only thing we have to just say is, I don't understand, God, but okay. Right? That's a lot of what we are holding, because we believe that God is one particular thing, or person, or being, right? But imagine if we said God is not just here, in this space, in this chapel, or in churches. But what if we said God is in the barbershop? God is at the grocery store, because that's how you're gonna eat.
Yes.
God is with the trees.
Yes.
God is with the birds, right? God is not just what our human brains can fathom, but how do we allow ourselves to expand and be comfortable enough with, I'm not used to thinking of you in this way, but I'm still gonna say yes. I'm still going to go there. So a lot of our reimagining about our communities is even about how we even understand ourselves and how we are supposed to relate to each other, right? So reimagining, for us to even get to our big, big movements, we even need to reimagine if we could get there. Because we are the people that are gonna get us there. We are the people that we've been waiting for. Not another degree, I'm talking to myself. Not someone else. And something that we talked about when I first met you, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm on a panel with her, what? But what did you tell me? You said, it's not about that. You said, I am the next thing, because she's tired. She's tired, right? And we think that when we have to get to the next thing for us to feel that we're validated enough to reimagine. Imagine, you have to get a degree to tell you that you can actually reimagine. And that is what Empire has told us.
That's right.
Told us that we have to get accolades and that we have to be in ivory towers for us to actually do the work. That is actually distracting us from the fact that we actually have the wisdom in our bodies, and all we have to do is connect to the next person next to us for us to then say, yes, we can do it.
That's it.
So really, empire is the distraction. And we could do our work in the ivory tower, don't get me wrong, we are needed in those spaces. But my queerness allowed me to see that expansion is possible. And that my little heart of mine and my body can do it.
Yes.
I just have to trust that it can do it. That my mind wants to expand. It wants to understand God in a different way. So are we going to allow ourselves to understand God in a different way is the question. Because it's already there waiting. Okay, I'm done.
Nordia, thank you so much for everything you just shared with us. Dr. Martin, I have so much to draw upon in your experience too. I want to invite all of us, we're just going to take a moment to pause, and I'm actually going to pose a question that Nordia shared with us at the beginning of this conversation. That is, where do you want to go, and what is keeping you from going there? So I invite you to consider this. You are welcome to turn to those people you met a few minutes ago to have this conversation. You're also welcome to sit in silence. And why don't we say, if you'd like to think about this yourself, feel free to close your eyes, and that will be a sign to all of us that you are thinking within yourself. If you feel comfortable sharing, I invite you to turn to your neighbors. We'll reconvene in a few moments. You were perfect. That was, you just blessed us. No, we're going to ask her to. We're going to get to you. I just want to stay. I promise.
Okay. It's good. See what it does to us? We always think we're not okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Fine. Dr. Martin, you're absolutely right. Yes, and I'm hoping, I don't want to monopolize too much of the time. So I'll probably let students ask. But I think so. Yes.
Engaged.
Yes, that's all right.
Yes, it is okay.
Great. And my initial thought was I was going to turn to Nordia, then I would turn to you.
Yeah.
That sounds good, and I hope...
We don't have to be in this order. We want to hear. They've opened up our week.
Thank you so much for it. Thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm hopeful, I'll say something too, because I think we have so much to learn from all of the experience you've been through. So I'll invite questions in that regard too, if that sounds good.
Sounds great.
And the remarks you gave, just they touch my soul. And I just know, you've seen in the ways in which your critical conscience has driven you away of commitment, unflinching commitment, despite the violence that you have faced. And I have so much admiration and gratitude for that. I feel that. Thank you. I feel it. But the witness you have borne, the example you have set, and I think for all of us this weekend, what has been so powerful has been to see the ways in which you have formed Reverend Eric, the ways that Reverend Eric and both of you have ministered to us, and to see that kind of intergenerational project for me, but I think I'm speaking for many others.
Yes, and you can say that as well. Yes. There's a lot more. I'm part of that lineage where women today that are still alive, that were in the movement, civil rights movements, women that were in their 80s. So they nurtured me and mentored me. So, and it keeps going. And we evolved into the politics. I didn't know that would happen, but that's what happened.
Would you like to say something to that effect, just when we reconvene for a moment, and then what'll happen, so I'll gather us back. I'll give you the floor, and however you move this week. And
you can bring up what you just said about the lineage and the mentoring.
Yes, and I'll pass it to you. Then what will happen?
This is intergenerational.
Yes.
You see?
And that's what you said, Nordia. Yes.
There comes a point where you must pass them on the baton.
I'm coming to Boston.
Just, when I'm also going to, when I gather us, I'm going to go back down because I'm going to have the microphone ready to bring to students.
Okay, cool.
But we're going to give, I'm just going to say something and then pass it to Dr. Martin, or Dr. Martin speaking. I'm going to go down. I'll stay down there. But and then both of you, please feel free to talk until we wrap up.
Okay, what time is this? Are we?
We might go a little past 11:30, so it's
cool.
11:22. I think we might be going to go about 11:37, 38.
Okay.
We'll see what kind of questions are coming with the energy and spirit.
Okay, cool.
That sounds good to both of you?
Yes, that sounds great.
I'm so grateful for everything. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Take a few seconds to wrap up your conversations. It's such a blessing to be seated here and to look out at all of you and to see just the range of conversations, the ways that some of you moved seats, the ways you had turned around. And I'm hopeful that in just a moment you'll have a chance to share some of what was just on your hearts and minds. Reverend Dr. Martin and I were just speaking. Something we were talking about in our own conversation was how very blessed we have been this weekend to understand the lineage and the legacy that Dr. Martin has passed on to Reverend Erica, and the ways that both of them have ministered to us and taught us this weekend. So we were thinking about the ways in which Dr. Martin, in your own work, which continues today, and in your own generation, you have borne that witness. And so Dr. Martin's going to reflect on just that conversation we had for a few moments. I'm going to come down with the microphone, and so once Dr. Martin concludes, I invite you to raise your hand. I'll come to you with the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I was sharing with Nordia the task and the responsibility of the intergenerational connection and that lineage that we come from. And the importance of knowing that we are all, when we look at that artwork of the woman that's pregnant, we are all pregnant right now with the possibilities and the imagination. So, yes, Reverend Erica is one of many mentees along this lineage. When I came into the movement in my early 20s, I was mentored by women in the movement who still are alive today, and we shall call their name, Reverend Annie Chambers, who was one of the original members of Resurrection City, who was 9 months pregnant on her way to DC. She delivered the baby, passed it on to her dad, and she went on to Resurrection City, staying there for the duration of the time. We just left Washington, D.C., June 18th, and Reverend Annie Chambers was there, was not she, beloved? She was there. So we are continuing to build a beloved community. All of these beloveds, a beloved community based on love, right? Based on the struggle, based on caring for one another. Another woman is Marion Kramer, powerhouse, the wife of General Baker. Google, research their names. Marion Kramer, as a core student with SNCC, Nonviolent Student Coordinating Committee, she was part of CORE, she was organizing and running through the woods in Mississippi from the Ku Klux Klan. These are the women that mentored me. And as my mentor, Willie Baptist, says, who's the author of several books, including The Pedagogy of the Poor, Willie Baptist says, the more you know, the more you owe. And I must pass this down and pass it on into life, into action, right? As Nordia was saying, we must take action. We can reimagine and imagine all day. I used to sit around and imagine getting out of the American nightmare that I was a part of, right? And until my mentors, we talked about everything from dialectical historical materialism to the mode of what's happening through capitalism and commercialism and W.E.B. Du Bois' New Construction. So they taught me, and we studied together so I could adjust my lens, the lens that I was looking through. They poured into me. And as Assata Shakur said, it is our duty to love and protect one another. So the lineage is sacred. It's sacred. This gathering and convening is sacred. Our trauma is sacred. My life has been based on critical incidents, and I will not trigger you. And coming out of certain things, I said, ooh, I made it out of there. Doctors wanting release of information if I didn't make it. So the work that we do sometimes, I'm not scary, I'm not saying it happens to everybody. No, that's the disclaimer. Right. You heard the fluff in the beginning. Oh, Savina did this and we did. But honey, let me tell you, it was boots on the ground, all hands on deck, getting muddy, dirty, going to jail, getting... But today, we need new information that's coming down from the elders that you can break through with to change these death-dealing policies that this death-dealing society continues to perpetuate and oppress and kill according to those 5 evils: systemic poverty, systemic racism, systemic ecological devastation, the denial of health care, militarism, and outright Christian nationalism. We must launch a moral revolution in this country. And I'll leave it there.
Oh my goodness.
Test.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Martin. Now is time for your questions. Please raise your hand. I will come to you if you'd like to ask one.
Hi there. I was wondering if you could speak to how, if restorative justice is part of your work and also in the spirit of accessibility, how you define restorative justice in your work.
Can you repeat the question real quick, sorry? Restorative justice?
Yeah, so I was curious if you engage in restorative justice in your respective works, and if you could define what it means to you.
I have an interesting relationship with restorative justice. I will keep it real about that. I will say, I think there's a way in which that in order for us, for me to move through this work, there has to be an understanding of where harm is being placed. And I think in the pursuit for justice, and particularly the work that I want to do in the church, there is a heavy wanting for the church to acknowledge the hurt. And I think I've been in a particular situation in my personal life where sometimes restorative justice seems to not be enough. And sometimes it's not enough because it's from the people that hurt you and people that you love. And we grow up, particularly myself, I grew up in a Black church, Black community, where that's all we got. And it can come to a head where, do you leave your community and then voyage alone? Or do you stay to transform that? And that's a lot of work. And sometimes I don't want to do the labor. And sometimes I don't got to do the labor. And that's on that. And this is that's a question. Because I'm working it out right now. I'm working it out. And that's a true statement. And I don't want to be up here telling you that it is possible and that you should just do it and that's on that. And that we live in a particular society where, you know, we love to throw out justice-oriented terms, but when in reality we are really reckoning with our lives. So no, I'm not going to say I'm going to restore and re-transform harm. Sometimes I want to walk away and not look back because I don't care, because you hurt me. And we're Christians in this space, you know, proclaim sometimes. And sometimes Christianity will make you want to restore just for the sake of the body of Christ, but sometimes the body of Christ is, you want to call them a bad word. So I don't know what to do with that, and I'm going to be real about that, because sometimes that's the spirit to do that work. And sometimes it's okay to put things down and keep walking. And that is where restorative justice is for me. Because one thing you're not going to do is not get me out of my right mind. I'm going to stay in my right mind, and I know what I'm here for, and I know the mission at stake. And so what I am going to do is I'm going to put down human plausibility. I'm going to let spirit deal with spirit got to do, and I'm going to keep walking towards justice and where I need to go. And that is sometimes it. And sometimes it's not a conversation, and sometimes it's not a sorry, and sometimes it's not any of those things. Sometimes it is what it is. And we got to be okay with that, though. With the is what it is. So I'm not going to sit up in here and I'm not going to be sunshiny rainbow with restorative justice with you, because that's on that. Because the church has done some real harm, and the products of the church have done some real harm, and I'm going to leave you right there, and I'm going to keep walking.
Go ahead. You got that right. Got it right. I keep thinking about the do-over, or the reset, or what is restorative justice today in this world? Do we want to restore? Well, if we understand where we're at, it is painful what we're going through, right? We have to give birth, rebirth, right? We have to give birth to ourselves again, right? And how that looks, it'll look. To restore a sense of value, as Reverend Erica spoke about, was the value, because we don't have that values according to the systems, right? So how do we begin to identify the markers of what restorative justice is today within the Christian church? Right. I certainly, in thinking about reimagining a new heaven and a new earth, do not want to restore this place back to
whatsoever
how it's been, because it's not working.
It's not.
It's not working. Professor Kim talked about the fourth stage of cancer. Reverend Barber once preached on the country needing a heart transplant, and on and on and on. it's done. Particularly in the last period, going through a certain administration where we were all part of domestic violence and being traumatized. And now the concern of our women's laws to control their bodies, we are set back again. So the justice work will continue, however, we still must think about and talk about and cry about and pray about and meditate about and fast about these defining and shifting the narrative and the language, as our brother spoke about earlier on the panels, how we define and speak and use the language for this new heaven and this new earth. How do we restore our lives and the lives that are coming after you? I'll leave it there.
I will add, because you said it, things must die. They must. The only way a new heaven and a new earth is going to happen, like you said, it has to go. And one thing I will just add, we know it must go, but we remain in these conversations and preaching to the choir, but we must start thinking about what it looks like for it to look new. We have to start doing it, because if we keep talking about it, we ain't gonna get there. So we have to start thinking, we have to start writing. We got phones, write it in your notes. You got the memo, start talking to yourself in the memo. We have to just start putting it somewhere. Because if we keep talking about something dying, we're gonna become dead too. So we gotta start thinking about we gotta get there. We gotta start talking about the new heaven. We just gotta start talking about it. And then whoever wants to keep talking about it dying, we gotta have people keep talking about it. But then we gotta be a group of us over there delegating to start reimagining. We gotta just start doing it, right? Because when things come crumbling down, we gotta be ready. Where we going in the woods for the apocalypse? That's all I'm saying. Where we going? Where we going? Where to meet up at? Who cooking the meals? Who gonna do the aid? Like, we gotta start thinking about these things. Who house we meeting up at? You know what I mean? I 10 by 10, like, we need to know where we're going. So if we don't know where we're going, we gonna be stuck. And I'm talking to myself too at that. Okay? That's all I wanted to add on. I love you so much.
I went down to the rich man's house and I took back what he stole from me. Took back our dignity. Took back our humanity.
Thank you so much. We're going to have one more brief question here, and then I'm sure this conversation can and should continue after we depart. But just so for both of our speakers, we'll have the question here, and then if you would just take a moment or two to respond, and then we will thank you so much for all you've brought. So I'll pass the mic now.
Hello, thank you both so much for sharing with us. My question was about thinking about not just death, but being on a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. So thinking about death, I guess I want to hear both of your perspectives on how rebuilding happens, or because I'll share very briefly. I've heard this week conversations around like denominations dying, and I find myself in a point of tension because I'm a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and that denomination is so a part of our heritage and identity that it's like, how can I think about rebirth, so not in the sense of rebuilding as in the house fell down and now we're going to rebuild the house to look exactly the way that it looked before, or we're going to just restore and like tweak this and replace the plumbing and redo the electric and, you know, somehow make it livable. But I guess I'd like both of your perspectives on like, do you see death as an end, or death maybe, and I'm kind of inserting my own opinion here, but death as a stop in a cycle of life, death, and rebirth?
We are a resurrection people.
You may say that. Yeah. We're seeing, okay, so 4 years ago, Dr. King's movement was on the rise, right? And in 2017, it was resurrected. In 2019, the National Union of the Homeless resurrected. And what I'm hearing is this gathering hasn't been in formation for 50 years. Am I hearing that correct? So are we resurrecting? We are the resurrection. We are the resurrecting. When the 5 women and myself looked at that century-year-old building, we had to make sure that the foundation was intact, which it had a tree kind of root stuck in it. Sometimes we've got to not look at the leaves and the branches, but we have to go down deep into the roots and turn it over, right? Because those weeds will keep growing back. Anyway, we had to have a feasibility study, right? And they came in and assessed whether or not we could rebuild that house. And we didn't restore it the same way. We restored it according to the aesthetic and the criteria of rebuilding and transforming the women that would come through that house. So everything was hand-picked. Even our architect firm was called the Narrow Gate. And it was like 2 Kings because God sent all the builders in to help restore, right? And make anew. Even the Bible says that you can't put new wine into old wineskin. So I'll leave that there. I know where I was going, but.
I will just share one thing. I'm a plant mom. I got plant babies.
Yeah, I love it.
I got a lot of plant babies. I moved recently. Those plant babies died. At least 5 of them. I said, wow, am I a bad plant mom? You died on me. We changed environments, and then they had to adjust to the environment. And then one particular plant baby just kept just doing weird things. And then I said, is it me? And then someone said, it doesn't matter about what you're doing, the plant gonna do what she wanna do. But what are the conditions in which you are giving that plant so that she could thrive? I said, well, she near the window, you know? I was like, she got stuff, you know, she got stuff. But the air, what is the air? Is it humid air? Is it dry air? And then the water, there's chlorine in the water, like kind of thing. Is it water, right? But I'm saying this to say, but then I went to the plant store. The person I worked with, he said, I don't know, but what it looks like, you probably need to change the soil. And I said, okay, I'll change the soil, but then that will require me to do labor, which is to get the bag, take the bag home, undo all of that. And then he said, well, you gotta add other things to it. You got rocks? And then he said, do you got mesh? And I was like, well, I don't got mesh. He was like, do you got onions? I said, yeah, I got onions. And he said, well, that's mesh. So I said, oh, okay. So I changed the soil. I took everything out the soil. It was so much soil. It was a big plant. Took all the soil out. I had to give the plant new soil. And then I had to add things to it.
Yeah.
And then she started growing.
See?
So what is that to say? You gotta take it out. The structure gotta stay the same because she's still in her same plant bowl, and then you just add things. that wasn't there in the first place. So what I'm hearing from your question also is your identity is with that. Well, the Israelites had an identity, and what God said, he turned that around and said, well, you got a new covenant with me, and I'm different. So what is that to say? You keep your identity. I'm not leaving my Pentecostal identity. That thing's staying right there behind me. But guess what? I'm going to add something else with it, and then we're going to keep on walking. So that's how I came about your question.
Thank you all so much. Please join me in a round of applause for both of our speakers today.